extend a warm welcome to all of you for the session Idea to 1 Million Downloads. So I would welcome Mr. Kishore Mandam, the CEO of Impulse CRM. Kishore, can you please welcome the speakers?
Sure. Thanks, Neha. Oops, sorry. Afternoon, guys. We've got a bunch of interesting people speaking here. Alok Bajpai from Mexico. Can I have you on stage, please? Bharat Lingam from Xcube. And Umesh Kulkarni. I don't see Umesh. We lost him just outside the door. Can you find him? We just had him a moment ago. All right, we'll get Umesh on board in a moment. But let me just tell you, this is for me. All right, come on in. This is a fascinating panel, fascinating concept because. As a non-mobile guy, I read all the bad stories. I read stories about how 85%, 90% of the money on the app stores is being made by 20 companies, right? So this is like buying a lottery ticket. And as an entrepreneur, I'm not in that business. But here are three individuals who have done some significantly interesting things. They focus on very different businesses or targets. They have very different business models. And they've done it every single time. They've consistently put apps out there that have millions of downloads, millions of monthly active users, or whatever that term is called. I know very little about it. So I thought it would be very interesting to listen to them. Now, you'll find the resumes on the web. I'm not going to talk about that much, but there are some interesting things you might want to know. Alok Bajpai, CEO, co-founder of Xgo. He tells me that he knows more European languages than Indian languages. Right, so that tells you something about where mobile is going as a global kind of focus. And his company focuses on the Indian consumer. Right? Whereas you look at Bharat Lingam, entrepreneur has to take risks. This guy is a skydiver. This guy is a bungee jumper, focusing on the global user, which is kind of different again. And what Umesh does, he says he is personally comfortable with the bytecodes for Indian languages. So that talks about the global Indian, and that's where their focus is. So overall, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to take the first 20-25 minutes to talk, 22 minutes maybe, to talk about three parts of mobile. Right? We were talking about the idea phase. When you get the idea together, when you want to validate it, yada yada yada, there are a bunch of steps. And then there's a step of launching, which is building the app, launching it, putting things, getting iterative processes together. They'll talk about that. And finally about growing. How do you actually grow it to actually get those million users on a regular basis? So that's what we're going to talk about. Is that fair?
Yes.
Alright. So, and we will have some time for questions at the end. Yeah. So let's talk about the ideation phase, right? And I know, let me start with you, Bharat. You are a big proponent of this ideation space. You have a mic? You need to plug that in. So what do you do at the ideation step? What is important at that point?
Yeah, I think the idea is extremely important. If you rank idea, execution, and growth, I would put execution 1, idea 2, and growth 3. In terms of idea, obviously, given the fact that if you look at 80% of the revenue from the App Store, you have 0.2% of the apps on the App Store being able to make that particular revenue. So idea is important, and there are two key takeaways that that we have. One is that if you're looking at doing a new app or game, you should not look at anything less than 100 million users. In terms of in any kind of app that you create, you need to be able to envisage 100 million users for that particular app at the least, right? So because that's when you're going to once you have 100 million users, monetization is so easy for you to figure it out. So essentially, scale is very, very important for you on the idea space. The next is, if you look at successful models on the App Store, essentially you have big games. For example, Clash of Clans is doing a couple of $1 million every day. Candy Crush is doing $800-900 million. So that's basically and games are essentially the particular the variant of apps that are generating the largest revenue numbers in the App Store. The other area is essentially platform. So we're talking about Instagram, we're talking about Flipboard, we're talking about Bump, etc. So once you have a particular product out there in the App Store that has close to 100 million users, then obviously you can build, tons of different stuff around it. You can create, your own app store like what Evernote is, is able to do. So I think, that's basically another takeaway. If you're doing if you're essentially doing a flashlight app or, any of those kind of apps, you're not going to get the real scale, and you don't have the legs. I mean, in terms of volume, you're also not going to get the legs in terms of creating an ecosystem around your app. So that's, one of the things. And I think that there is ample opportunity even today to be able to, create great apps that have scale in terms of number of users. And from that perspective, we will need to look at, and when you come up with your idea, you will really need to think mobile first, because you can't. And mobile first isn't really about features; it's basically about experience. It's about really grokking or understanding mobile as a platform, which is very different because smaller screen is obvious, and beyond that, it is touch based. There are a lot more, basically input as well as, feedback mechanisms, etc. So I think that's, you really need to think of mobile, mobile first, and you need to look at, okay, let's take a, traditional problem. For example, mailbox, traditional problem, and then when Google, came up with Gmail and basically conquered, Hotmail, it basically did that with great amount of efficiency in the user interface. And if you look at mailbox, that's again able to, for doing nothing in the sense that in terms of, it's not really market success, but it still got bought for a, $100 million, tag, right? So we are talking about what, from a mobile first perspective, what is it that you're bringing, to the table? And I think the fourth takeaway would be that you need to have a clear understanding of what the problem that your app is solving. Is it basically making your users more efficient? Is it basically making sharing more easy? Is it making storage more easy? And ultimately, is it something that you would use it yourself? And is it something that you'd basically be very proud to tell everyone that this is the problem that I've been facing, and then I use this app, and now I'm not really facing this problem anymore. I think these are some of the key takeaways at the at the idea stage.
So if you have the idea right, and Alok, you were talking about are there ways we can validate that? Are there things we can do upfront to make it work later?
Sure. So just want to add to what you said about how do you look at market sizing and whether the market is big enough, and you should always chase larger markets. One of the things you have to remember is that look at indicators on mobile and not on web, because when you start looking at indicators on the web, you're not looking at the right data. There are a lot of use cases out there which will work terrifically well on mobile but might fail on web, right? And I think the biggest opportunities on mobile are some of those where you leverage, some of the features of the phone. If you look at a company like Waze, which is just leveraging your real-time location to get traffic updates, and they've built, a large enough business with that. Now, those sort of things cannot be done easily on the web, right? And I think one of the learnings we had was that if you ask people, why they use a certain app, 80 to 90% of the time, one app, one use case, right? There's one use case and you remember one app for it. A lot of people make the mistake of, trying to bundle in a lot of features on the first release. I think you've got to just identify, and that's where the process of identification becomes very critical. How do you identify that one killer feature that's going to take your app from, launch to, let's say, 100,000 downloads, right? And I think getting that insight, you should spend enough time and energy on trying to figure that out, as opposed to, worrying about growth and all the stuff that comes later, because I think that's the most critical part. One of the ways we try to de-risk that is we actually do click mocks on mobile. So there are, apps that allow you to build very fast click mocks based on just design inputs, and you can actually drag and drop things like buttons and, social features, etc. onto a screen. And in a matter of an hour, actually, you can design 4 or 5 screens with some click actions defined on them. So you go out there and you show it to a few users, potential users, right? And you let them play around with that app, and you very, very quickly get to know, what's working and what's not working. So in the past, we've launched, in the last 6 months, we've launched 5 apps. And, for all of them, we actually went out there and spoke to at least 15 to 20 people where we showed them, click mocks. We showed them maybe a very early version which was just running and not submitted to the App Store. And then quickly found out what works, what doesn't work, and then, just shunted what was not working and focused on what was working and just made that the best in the category. right? And I think that's the way you guys should think about validating your ideas before you actually launch. And of course, the validation process doesn't end at launch. It actually gets even more intense because you're getting more real-time feedback. You're getting ratings and reviews on the App Store. And launch is basically just a way of exposing it to a slightly larger set than the 15-20 people you showed it to. And it's a never-ending process till the time you discover that aha moment that this is the feature that's actually getting the organic pull for you, which is getting the word of mouth going, which is getting the incremental downloads. And that's where you just keep sharpening the edge of the sword, and you keep making it better and better through iterations, and that's how you get to the next level. So that's a learning there. Yeah.
That's interesting. But for you, Umesh, you have a slightly different problem, right? You've got a stable app on multiple platforms, not just smartphones. How does ideation work there?
I would start, maybe look at how the stage is set, right? I mean, we have 900 million mobile subscribers. Half of them have maybe devices which are having internet enabled. Smartphones may be a little lesser, but it is expected to grow. Now, a lot of these I'm talking about in Indian context, a lot of these users are coming from maybe the tier B, tier C, and a lot of them have different needs. For example, vernacular. I mean, news is all about vernacular. So if you look at the stage set, what are the problems that these people have? What are they missing? So if I look at the top 10 apps that are running in India, there are obviously, man is a social animal. I mean, all the applications which are of chat in nature, they are all popular global apps. They are all present in the top 10 apps in India. But there are basically some relevant local needs. That's where I think you can focus and look at what we can offer to them. So in my mind, the vernacular needs of these growing set of users is one of the place, and that's where we went after. And so it is about addressing the stages set. There are users, there are devices, there are plans. It's what are you offering to them? What is the unique problem that you are trying to solve? And then be at it and keep going after it. I think that's.
So if we take that, okay, as a process, you've got your ideation, you've done your validation, you've done your mock-ups, things are good. Now you need to go out and build, right? So Alok, in your mind, what are some of the things you do to get to that million downloads during the build stage?
Like I said, it's an iterative process. First of all, you get the hygiene factors right. So you make sure that only crashes, the testing on multiple devices, and which is one reason why you shouldn't dream of getting it to 1 million downloads in a shorter period of time, because you might miss out on some obvious bloopers. So it's better initially to have a slow ramp while you're figuring it out. What are the obvious mistakes that you've still made and you still need to fix. And I think most of the successful apps will do anything between 8 to 10 builds within the first couple of months of launch, for the simple reason that you keep discovering, serious errors, bugs, some permissions which weren't there, some very basic hygiene things, memory footprint, processor footprint. And if you can optimize all those, I would say that 90% of the apps that fail do not optimize the basics. And I think the moment you optimize for the basics, you are already in the 10% where, for the use case you're solving, at least you've got the basics right. And then comes the point of, are people liking it to the extent where they are willing to tell others about it, right? Are they going to talk about it on social? Have you created hooks in your apps for them to talk about it on social if they like it? How easy is it for them to send feedback? Are you listening and responding to that feedback? So in our case, we've responded. We get almost 100 feedbacks a day across our apps. We respond to every single one of them within 48 hours. And I think we've got tremendous learning by talking to those people, because sometimes they respond back with some more information and you find something in your app which you can really make better, right? And I think it's the constant learning process which helps you get to a point where it's getting better and better. So you're starting to see from 50 downloads a day to 100 downloads a day, and starts to incrementally. And one fine day, you see that your ranking has gone up into the top 10, and you went from 100 downloads a day to 800 downloads a day or 1,000 downloads a day, and that's where the hockey stick kicks in. So I think sometimes it might not be bad to push push yourself into that hockey stick growth. If you think that everything is validated, sometimes it's okay to go out there, push that app for a week, a couple of weeks on whatever paid download channels or PR or Facebook or whatever distribution channel you want to use, maybe newsprint, whatever, right? But if you push it from, let's say, a rank of 50, getting into the top 10 within a week is not very difficult. It's about staying there, and that's where your app's use case and how much engagement it has, that will matter whether you'll be able to stay there, right? So only do this once you're confident, but once you're confident, you can apply the gate strategy, which is spend money to get into the top 10 ranks, and then see if your app has it in it to stay there, right? So that's what we've done for a couple of our apps. Some of them, so one of them stayed there, one of them didn't. We're still figuring the other one out, right? And I think that's the only way you can learn what's working, what's not working.
Is that true for you too, Umesh? Is that similar?
In my mind, the two words that describe it and what you should be really looking for is, it works. The most important thing, your app has to work. I mean, if you are building a news app, it better deliver news. If you are building a music app, it better have audio quality proper. If you are, very, very important thing that it should work. There are aspects of, in terms of footprint, the amount of memory it takes, the download size, responsiveness of the app. How much time, if you are having an app which is connected to internet, you better show a page within 3 seconds. So these are some of the kind of hygiene factors and very important. I mean, if you don't do this right, it's a huge task, first of all, to get someone to observe that there is an app like this. Then make him interested, get him to download, make him use, and after that, if it doesn't work, he's never going to come back to this. So the whole funnel of getting an active user is a very costly and time-consuming affair. And if you have made a mistake after he has gone through all these steps, so that's I think in my mind most important thing. The second thing that you need to be doing is basically look at the target audience that you are trying to address. What is their handset holding pattern? If you're looking for an app which is meant for farmers and you are building an iOS and Android application, that's not going to obviously make sense. So look at the target audience, what are their handset holding patterns, choose the platform right, and then go after that. So these are two aspects that come to my mind. The second very important is basically, as they said, it's basically look at the feedback. Users, the handset variety is so much. You have about like 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 types of handsets. It's almost impossible if you want to try and verify everything in lab. So, and there are users who are going to tell you everything. They want what features they want, what are the problems they are facing. You need to be very, very sensitive to that, respond to that, fix the problems right away, and iterate. I think that's...
So, Bharat, in your case, you're launching what, 10, 15 apps a month? So what do you do that's common in the build stage?
Yeah, I think when it comes to build, to be able to deliver an app that really gives you the results that you want, the first thing that you need to remember is that it's or at least it's my belief that there is no real first to market or time to market advantage in this space. Okay, so what you need to look at is essentially you may take more time, but does your app have the right engagement metrics? Does it have the right engagement metrics? Does it have the right retention metrics? And later on, does it have the right monetization metrics? So I would say the most and also when we're talking about the execution, it's not just the the product that's in the technology execution. Marketing execution is built into the product execution. So you need to ensure that so you thought out all the marketing hacks that the sharing hacks or the the psychological pressure building kind of tactics that are built into the the app during the execution stage itself. And the other thing is as Alok pointed out, your app does just one thing very well. So you need to be able to abstract what are the key goals, what are the you can't have more than 80% of your app just does one thing, 10% or 15% of your app does another, and then 5% does the rest. So essentially, so you need to identify what your goals are, and you need to have some very, very solid metrics, right? Where you're talking about some 10 to 15 metrics that you're that your app should stand up to, and you need to have those metrics, a priori, ahead of actually even, starting building your app. And your usable and the way your user interface is laid out should also be in alignment with those kind of metrics. These metrics could be, your virality metrics or essentially your, retention metrics, etc. Right? And user interface plays a very, very prominent role. So I would say that during your build stage itself, you need to probably look at, at least a couple of variants of your application, that you would want to test out in the, the pre-global launch period, so that you were able to figure out which user interface delivers, better than the rest. So that's one thing. And, in recent times, we've seen that all the apps that are, that are successful have slightly different, user interface. For example, you have an app like Clear, which is a clear, to-do list management kind of an app, but it became very popular because of the novel approach it took towards its, user interface. Or if you look at a game like Heyday, what are they doing? They're doing basically Farmville on mobile, but essentially they infused a lot more passion into building the actual user interface of the application. That basically became the key differentiator, and therefore having a very simple as well as engaging user interface is something that's very, very important for you. And I would like to also add that in terms of mobile, right now we are moving towards something like mobile 3.0, where your apps are incredibly more context relevant. If you look at Google Now, etc., it exactly knows the kind of information that you want in it, without you telling it, and then it's able to basically predict your intent and be able to serve you content and features that are that work according to your intent. And then we have made so many advances in machine learning now, and being able to make your app more context sensitive, being able to make your app more user intuitive, I think that is key. That's basically the next stage in terms of the app success. The other thing that we should not forget is building a lot of instrumentation into the app, right at the build stage. So, for example, you can build in qualitative surveys. You need to build in a lot of analytical hooks. You need to build in heat maps, etc. At least in the initial stage of the app building. So that's basically what you need to do. And and I would say when you're preparing to launch, basically you can launch in different names in different app stores. And you can basically buy some users, buy a couple of thousand users, figuring out if you're able to get the engagement metrics. And once you're able to get the engagement metrics, go out into the marketplace. And in this time period, you basically create a lot of anticipation in the marketplace, reach out to influencers, reach out to bloggers, talk to them about what you're doing, create excitement. But your global launch should not happen until you hit your engagement metrics.
So we started 10 minutes late, but we're still running behind. How many of you will ask questions when I stop? Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is 1 minute each about growth. Unfortunately, I don't have any time, right? So, Umesh, let's start with you. In terms of growth, what can you do to truly grow user downloads and monthly actives?
Very important, organic growth. The app has to have features that the user likes and for which he will stay. Second, figure out ways for the user to be able to recommend to his friends, be it the app or sharing things from the app. There is a need for having some amount of, little bit of paid things to climb up the ranking so that you come in the eyes of the users and use work well with manufacturers. A lot of them help you with design guidelines, other things, even the App Store guidelines. Eventually that leads to, apps getting to pre-buns. So I would say these are the 3-4 areas which you need to look for growth. Most importantly, whenever you are trying channels for growth, where I am promoting, what am I doing, there is a need for an MIS which is tracking that what kind of download is leading me to an active user, what kind of download is leading me to a retained user. So we need to be able to measure all these things channel-wise. If I am promoting something on AdWords, what is the quality of the user that I am getting, and then keep iterating on it.
Bharat, your 1 minute.
Yeah, so I'll again say, execution, number one. In terms of growth, relationships with Apple, Google, relationships with the key influencers in the marketplace, your TechCrunch, VentureHack, VentureBeat, etc. The amount of virality that you build into the product. So, bottom line being, if my cost of user acquisition is less than the the lifetime value of the user that comes onto my app, I can always buy users. So that's a no-brainer. Yeah.
Alok, what do you think?
So, just simply figure out why people uninstall your app, right? It's no secret, but if you have an uninstall rate, uninstall upon install less than 40%, you're set for growth, right? But most apps don't achieve that, and all you got to do is figure out why people are uninstalling, and sometimes it's one of the hygiene factors. At other times, you figure out, you were going after the wrong pain area. You haven't solved that pain area completely, that one single use case that you identified. So I think if you are able to fix both of these, which is, get the basics right and solve for the pain area, I think growth becomes a no-brainer.
Thanks. Questions? Who's got the mic? Okay, we'll start with the first row. I'll come back to you.
Hi.
I'll repeat your question.
Yeah, hi. Some of you might be developing your own products and managing with some services also. So how do you manage as a company your services engagement in the mobile platform as well as your own products? So do you have a separate team, or is it when the team is not busy with the services you go for products? I just like to have some.
So that's always a complex challenge. So in terms of architecture, we are structured as essentially, growth and value, and products come into value, and value has a separate team allocated to it. The metrics on which they are judged are completely different. So right now we are in the incubation stage and a few products. So essentially they're not held to the value team is not held to the same metrics as the growth team in terms of P&L and stuff like that. So their numbers are different.
So the value team can have fun, the others have to work.
Everybody has fun and everybody works.
That's a good one. Thanks.
If I can add to that, it is basically the temptation to always survive by doing services always exists. But you are after that one thing that you want to really achieve, I think you'll have to sometimes give up on that temptation. I personally have gone through this, and I would always recommend, stick to, if you have an idea in mind, be it an accelerated failure, but go after it, don't try to survive by it.
Yes.
Yeah, this is for Alok. I install apps because you ask me too many permissions. Right, so just want to understand, how do you define the permissions for a particular app? Because for a non-location based app also, it requires me to share my location. And I'm scared to use apps like Facebook because it reads my entire stuff, from my messages to my SMSs my wife has sent to me. So how do I define?
Sure. So I think the learning is that in India people are at least less sensitive than rest of the markets in terms of permissions. That's what we've seen. I think you've got to be transparent, right? So if you're actually using the location in the app for something meaningful, make sure that's mentioned in the app description. Make sure that in the About Us section inside the app or wherever you're telling people more about the feature, help section, whatever, you talk about that, right? Because I think it's wrong, it's plain wrong if you're asking for a permission and not using it, because of course that will impede a certain number of users. But if you're asking for the user permission but using it even in a specific use case, it's better to just outline that use case in the app description. I've seen that approach work. One of our apps relies on reading your SMSs for looking at whether you got a IRCTC PNR or a airline PNR lying in your SMS inbox. And I think you can't use that app unless you give it that permission, right? And that's pretty upfront out there in the description. And so I think as long as you're able to justify, and if you're not using it maliciously, and of course if people have some trust in your brand, people won't mind, right?
I can quickly add to use the permission if you really need it. I think we have gone through this exercise. At some point we were looking for some features around like click and SMS for an ad. There is a way to do that. You can launch a default SMS sender, and that doesn't require a permission. But if you are trying to do it without launching that screen, it requires a permission. So, and permissions do make a difference. We have had a cycle, basically if my normal uptake of an upgrade is 100%, if I do the wrong set of permissions, it came down to 50%. Permissions are really important. Use them if you really need it.
I'm sorry, we have the last question. Who has the mic? Okay, you can shout. I'm sorry. Right.
So, one question I wanted to ask was, what is the correlation between the revenue that you can make vis-a-vis the downloads that you have? So, if you have 1 million downloads, if you use plain Jane display banner, what is the revenue that you can make?
I think in our own experience, if you're talking about banner-driven revenue, I think you shouldn't even, we haven't been successful, we had over 10 million downloads for an app, but we didn't really make very much revenue through, just through ads, okay? And I would rather measure revenue based on the monthly active users, in terms of, or per user contribution to revenue once the download happens. So that's, if you're able to, for example, acquire user for a couple of dollars, and that guy delivers like $3 over a 2-month period, then I think that's that's pretty good. So overall, our revenue generation has been primarily through in-app purchases or through paid apps.
But for somebody like a news fan, I use your app, what would be?
So my outlook is basically plain simple banner ads are not going to scale that well. So you need basically things like Emerald that are coming up. The ads have to be non-intrusive, the good news is basically if yesteryears the ads were all click and download and install another app, the scenario is fast changing. There are brands which are coming up and advertising. The creative use of the ad space is what will matter. Plus you need not plain banner ads. Interstitials do work well. There is a large screen space available in between your pages. Interstitials work well. Interactive ads are going to be required. So the standards like Emerald that are coming up, interactive ads, banner ads will have less amount of performance, but these kind of ads which are interactive, engaging, and giving enough space for the brand to be recognized and remembered, and those will do well.
Thanks a lot, guys. Sorry we have to cut you off, but they'll be available. You can talk to them later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Please give your feedback on the number available, and I would like to say that Alok got us some goodies from Exigo which are outside on the table, but before that I would like to like all of you to attend the session which is now, that is Mobile Before Web.